Greetings, and welcome to Masterpiece Fanfic Theater, where we celebrate the very best in the very worst of fan fiction. You know, working here at Channel Awesome, it comes with its own share of baggage. Sure, you're loved by throngs of fans, but those same fans can turn that love into something wholly more disturbing. One form of such love is predictably fan fiction, and I hold in my hand a loving tribute story to nearly all of us here at thatguywiththeglasses.com. The story is called Birthday Party Cheesecake Jelly Bean Boom! Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Dr. Insano by Aunt Zelda. Our story begins. Disclaimer. I do not own any of these characters. They are all the online personas of real live people whose videos can be found here at http://thatguywiththeglasses.com/ and here at http://www.cinemassacre.com/news/. I mean no offense. Pray that this does not attract Bennett the Sage, and am making no money, and would love it if I were not sued. I do not own the Suicide Girls trademark, nor mean any disrespect towards them. That whole bit is purely based upon an in-joke from the end of one of Spoonie's videos. No one expected him to succeed. I mean, honestly, would you have? Push and eat macaroni? Moonlighting on the supervillain shopping network? Not exactly the makings of a world conqueror. In fact, it wasn't until his time manipulation machine started working that we began to take him seriously, and by then, it was too late. The summer after the brawl, he appeared out of the clear blue with a gigantic army of deathbots. He made a beeline straight for Linkara, and it took all of Linkara's skill to escape that one to sound the alarm and round us up. Channel Awesome made a final stand against Insano's forces, and we suffered heavy losses as a result. Handsome Tom, and 8-Bit Mickey, Bennett the Sage, Sean the Epic Fail Guy, Lee and Dina Davidge, and even Ask That Guy, the things that he did to that last volley of robots, I still have nightmares about it. We lost. We lost, and Dr. Insano launched his campaign for world domination, of course. First taking America, and then extending his reach to the world. Governments resisted, and were crushed. Canada deployed snipers, and after Dr. Insano defeated them as well, he made good on his word and ripped Canada from the continent, transported it thousands of miles, rotated it 180 degrees, and attached it below Australia. Refugees flocked to the bewildered new country, and for the most part, Dr. Insano let them be. Other countries were not so lucky. In fact, no other country were as lucky. The populations were either massacred and zombified for gladiator fights, or run through the obedience domes until they might as well have been zombies. Dr. Insano seemed to have a deranged sort of soft spot for Austrandada. Then again, he did create it himself. 3 weeks after Austrandada was made official and we received reports from that the obedience domes there were much milder than the ones around the rest of the world, they weren't machines that were taking place everywhere else. Pa proposed to Little Miss Gamer. She said yes, and that night, without telling anyone, they eloped to Austrandada to live out their lives in peace. The rest of us vowed to continue fighting. We would defeat Dr. Insano and free the world from his tyrannical, insane reign. This wasn't over. Not by Spoon. The man in the chair looked around guiltily, switching off his webcam as discreetly as he could. Yeah? Benzai was leaning in the doorway. The NZs are still woozy from getting zapped the other day, he said, adjusting the strap of his huge ray gun. You, me, and Joe had patrol duty this afternoon. Spoonie smiled faintly, locating his own ray gun and slipping on his jacket. Just our luck, eh? Does Linkara have a special mission for us? Besides not getting killed. Benzai made an exaggerated expression of thinking. No. Spoonie nodded. Okay. He glanced longingly at the webcam perched on his dusty bookcase before heading out the door. Benzai close behind him. Take that, you motherfucking cocksuckers! Spoonie, Benzai, and Angry Joe exchanged looks of surprise. Was that? Spoonie began, before pausing to listen to yet another distant tirade. My mom writes better programs than the shit you've got running through your mainframes, Transformer knockoff chrome-domed assholes!
The only person who swears like that is me, and I do that in fun,
Benzai said. Angry Joe shouldered his gun.
Devastatingly awesome trio! Let us move out!
Spoonie nodded.
Agreed.
The three men raced down the street, keeping an eye out for stray robots. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a courtyard, where the angry video game nerd, looking slightly worse for wear, was tossing boomerang pens at robots from atop the crumbling remains of a fountain, while his guitar guy, Kyle, was warding off 3 or 4 robots with only his signature instrument.
Attack!
Joe roared, zapping at large groups of robots. Arcs of blue and green light filled the courtyard. Boomerang pens sliced through the air, and Kyle's guitar kathunked satisfyingly against metal. Together, the men made short work of the Insanobots. As the smoke cleared and Kyle finished off the last robot, the devastatingly awesome trio strode over to the AVGN. Hey, aren't you guys? The AVGN scowled.
Right.
You're with him. Benzai blinked.
Clean?
Spoonie elbowed the Frenchman in the side.
He means the Critic,
he hissed. Addressing the nerd, he said,
Technically, we're with Linkara. Everyone is now. Well, everyone who's alive and resisting Dr. Insano.
The AVGN eyed Spoonie suspiciously.
These two here were on my side of the brawl, he nodded at Angry Joe and Benzai. But you weren't.
He tilted his head to the side.
Anyone ever told you that you look an awful lot like Dr. Insano?
Spoonie rolled his eyes.
Oh, fine. Make personal comments to the guys who just saved your ass. My ass was perfectly fine when you showed up, clone boy.
Spoonie shoved his gun at Benzai.
Okay, that's it. Screw continuing humanity. Only way we're coming back to the hideout is in a body bag, irate gamer.
The AVGN decked Spoonie hard, but Spoonie had learned how to take a punch. Rolling back, he straightened up and tackled the nerd to the ground. They rolled towards the fountain, away from their companions, punching at each other furiously.
Say, you do music, huh?
Angry Joe said, conversationally to Kyle, who was idly running his hand along the neck of his guitar.
Yeah,
Kyle's nodded, discovering a dent in his instrument and sighing heavily.
Theme songs?
Angry Joe pressed. Until Dr. Insano took over, yeah.
Cool.
Joe straightened up, clearing his throat.
You know, I've been looking for a theme song.
Guys?
Benzai nodded at the two fighters.
Shouldn't we break them up before they kill each other? I mean, I'm desperate for amusement too, but then God will kill us if they don't come to dead bodies.
Good point. Angry Joe strode forward, pulling out the combatants apart. All right, that's enough. He shoved the AVGN towards Kyle, holding Spoonie back with difficulty. Mr. Nerd, I'm sure you've been through a lot lately, but the fact remains that we're some sort of last people on Earth, with our brain unfucked up. It'd sure be nice to keep them that way. He let go of Spoonie and silenced him with a glare. Come on, we better get back to the hideout before more robots show up. Kyle and the AVGN hesitated.
Unless you have somewhere else to be?
Benzai asked, feigning concern. The AVGN shrugged.
Whatever. Crashing with that shiffer-brains Critic is better than sleeping in the subway. But only just.
Nerd! The nostalgia chick clamped her hands over her ears.
Shut up, Critic! Nerd!
Mars Girl threw a pillow at the Critic. It didn't deter him at all.
No!
Smack.
Shut the hell up, Critic! Some of us are trying to sleep!
That chick with the goggles rolled over on the couch, hugging the pillow Mars Girl had thrown. Goggles sat up and took off her goggles, fixing the Critic with her best glare.
Swear to God, Critic, you shout at him one more time!
She let the words hang in the air, standing up and pursing her lips. When the Critic made a meep sort of noise and sat down on the couch, she nodded.
Good boy.
The AVGN snorted. Dude, she's got you whipped good. Goggles flashed a warning look at the nerd, and he too fell silent. Mars Girl coughed.
Well, this is a surprise.
She smiled weakly at the AVGN and Kyle.
I'm Mars Girl, and that's Goggles, and, him.
Mars Girl nodded at the Critic.
Then the nostalgia chick, you already know Spoonie and Benzai and Joe, Mati.
Mati waved cheerfully at the nerd, who just stared at him.
And, Lingara's still asleep. He's the leader, kind of. Well, he's Dr. Insano's nemesis, so... yeah.
The nerd gazed around the small, cramped room, littered with couches and chairs, a humming refrigerator on the far wall, and a counter laden with kitchen utensils and boxes of cereal. There was the door that they'd come in through, after going down 2 flights of stairs, rappelling through an elevator shaft, and crawling into a hidden door in a supply closet, and another door that led to a long hallway with doors branching off of it. Grouped around a flickering TV and spread out over the couches and chairs were 8 people. Mars Girl, her hair dyed battle red. That chick with the goggles, her goggles looking distinctly mechanized and wearing shorter hair than ever. The Nostalgia Critic, his tie singed, his shirt stained, his jacket ripped. The Nostalgia Chick, bow tie gone, her hair braided and pinned down, and long, jagged scar running down her leg. Spoony, his hair long and in a ponytail with makings of a beard on his face. Benzai, a scar cut across his mouth. Joe, looking almost at ease with the state of things, but constantly twitching to make sure that his gun was at his side. And finally, Mati, who looked exactly the same as before, except for the fact that he was wearing combat boots. "Is that it?" the nerd asked. "I mean, of the resistance?" Mars Girl bit her lip.
Well, we started out a lot bigger, but then there was the battle, and, well, we lost a lot of people.
She ducked her head and sniffed heavily. The Nostalgia Chick reached over the back of the couch and patted Mars Girl on the arm. Silence dragged on. The critic hadn't taken his eyes off the nerd and kept looking like he dearly wanted to say something. But then he glanced at Goggles, slumped a bit, and lost his nerve. "What the fuck is that?" the nerd asked, staring at the TV. "That is what we call a television," the critic said slowly, widening his eyes in mock concern.
Did Nasty Insano's robots hit the big bad angry video game nerd on the head?
The AVGN scowled. "I know what a TV is, fucktard. I was talking about the hot chick." There was indeed a beautiful woman on TV. As Mati scrambled for the remote, Kyle sat down on the couch, gazing at the screen and grabbing a protein bar from the table. Crunching on the bar, Kyle said, "I wasn't aware that there was still transmissions operating. And then again, we have been moving around a lot. It wasn't time to check if the cable was still operational." "It's not cable," growled a new voice. Everyone jumped, whirling around to see Linkara standing in the doorway, running a hand through his bedhead and rubbing his eyes. He looked relatively unchanged, but closer inspection showed that there was a certain hardness around the edges that hadn't been there before. "It's Dr. Insano's channel. The only channel." Mati finally located the remote and turned on the volume.
Hi, I'm Raven,
purred the sensuous woman on the TV screen.
And we're Suicide Girls here at Dr. Insano's hair. I want you to know.
The camera panned back to show a slew of pierced, tattooed women with multicolored hair strewn over a large bed. The women chorused,
"Worship Insano! Your lives will be spared if you're unique enough."
They giggled and started a pillow fight, Raven winking at the camera before diving into the melee. The men groaned, drooling as the camera showed 2 Suicide Girls descending into a passionate kiss. The Nostalgia Chick switched the TV off.
"You guys are pathetic."
Mars Girl nodded, crossing her arms.
"Insano shows a little girl on girl, and you're ready to report to his obedience domes?"
The men hung their heads in shame. "I'm sorry," Spoony said. "We're weak," the Nostalgia Critic added, sighing heavily. "Heart," Mati whimpered. Linkara coughed delicately. "So, who's up for patrol duty tonight?"
"Me, you, and the chick,"
Mars Girl said, shooting another glare at Spoony, who was making a grab for the remote. "Good! Now let's get out of here. Who knows, maybe we'll find some more unexpected guests." Linkara eyed the nerd and the critic, who were back to sizing each other up like alley cats. "Try not to kill each other while I'm away, will you? We need all the help we can get." He drew his pistol and headed for the exit, Mars Girl and the chick at his heels. As soon as the hatch door closed, the critic stood up, shrugging off Goggles' warning arm and glaring at the nerd. "My room, 5 minutes!" He stepped forward so that he and the nerd were practically nose to nose. "Let's settle this once and for all." Linkara groaned and rolled over. coming face to chest with an impressive display of cleavage. What? Linkara sat up, looking around wildly. This wasn't his room at the hideout. It was a huge, well-lit room decked out in a sickening array of rainbow gothic lace and pink. And the women around him weren't the women of the Resistance. They were the Suicide Girls. Dr. Encino's harem. He was lying on a bed in a room full of beautiful women. Many of them were scantily clad. What the hell? Linkara hoarsely asked. Desperately, he thought back to his last memories. He and Marsgirl in goggles had been out on patrol and tracking some robots, hoping to find more humans with unaltered minds like AVG and Kyle. They'd split up, intending to meet up in the courtyard, but when Linkara got in there, he'd run straight into a platoon of Insanobots. He fought them with everything he had, but there'd been too many. Instead of frying them, however, they'd hit him over the head and brought him here.
So, you're the nemesis.
The Suicide Girl, lying on the bed next to Linkara, stretched like a cat and rolled onto her back, smirking as she saw Linkara's eyes moving over her.
You're all Insano ever talks about. Raven!
One of the other girls piped up.
Insano said we should alert him when Linkara's woken up. He's awake now.
Raven, the woman lying next to Linkara, sat up and shot the girl a nasty look.
And your point is?
The girl toyed with her lip ring.
It's just, I don't want to make him angry at us. He never pays attention to us, Maddie.
Raven snapped.
Any attention beyond orders to shoot those disgusting infomercials would be a welcome change.
She turned back to Linkara and smiled, annoyance vanishing.
Now then, let's get you out of those clothes.
Linkara's eyebrows shot up past his hairline. Wait, what? He made some feeble attempts at resistance as Raven began unbuttoning his shirt.
This could be our last chance, ladies, but I get first go.
Raven called over her shoulder as the rest of the harem began creeping closer.
We're not what you think we are, Linkara.
Really? Linkara squeaked as another girl began untying his boots.
Insano never plays with us.
Raven slid onto Linkara's lap.
You know what I mean?
Eh? Linkara managed, watching as Raven took his hat and placed it on her own head.
We're just for show. We're all beards.
Raven sighed heavily, leaning down to Linkara.
It gets boring in here sometimes. I mean, we've got each other, but some of us just aren't into that.
Raven grinned.
Myself included.
Before Linkara could answer, Raven dove down and kissed him, practically swallowing his face in her desperation. While Linkara was busy trying to figure out how, and if, he should get out of this situation, Raven shifted her hips and began humping him, slowly but surely driving every thought from Linkara's mind. So what if he was trapped inside the lair of his enemy? He was trapped in a room full of hot chicks who wanted to jump him. Wasn't that a dream come true? Bang! The girls scattered. Blearily, Linkara sat up to see several Insanobots in the doorway, standing on the remains of the door and the barricade the girls had constructed before it. The Creator summons arch-nemesis Linkara to his chambers. Casting a regretful look at Raven and the rest of the cowering Suicide Girls, Linkara stood up, slid on his boots, and put his hat back on. Reality had literally broken down the door. Linkara was in the lair of his enemy, an enemy that had been trying to kill / imprison / utterly destroy him for years. Nothing short of a miracle was going to help him get him out alive.
I need help here.
Spoony, who had been half asleep on the couch, sat up and grabbed his gun from the coffee table in a blind panic, whirling around to where the voice had come from. He sat the gun down and vaulted over the couch.
Marsgirl, what happened? Damn robots!
Growled the nostalgia chick, clinging to Marsgirl as they staggered into the room.
Make Insano wish he was never bored. Owie, owie, owie.
Together, Marsgirl and Spoony managed to get the nostalgia chick onto the couch and start cleaning and pressing the wounds.
Nothing's broken or sprained, but those Insanobots got you for good.
Marsgirl said, letting the chick squeeze her hand as Spoony put iodine on her largest cut.
Fuck. Yeah, they got me bad, but not as bad as they got Linkara.
The chick slumped. Spoony looked up. What do you mean? Wait! Spoony looked around the room, lowering his voice. He asked, Mars, where's Linkara? Marsgirl pressed her lips together, eyes brimming with tears.
Right now, he's probably in Dr. Insano's lair, strapping to an experiment table and getting prepped to be turned into a robot.
Spoony stared at her in horror. But we're going to rescue him, right?
Of course we are, you idiot!
Marsgirl snapped. rubbing her eyes furiously.
But not tonight. If Linkara's not dead already, he won't be for a while. Encino's been chasing him for years. He'll want to mess with him for a good long time. We'll tell everyone in the morning and make a plan. Right now, we need to sleep.
Mars Girl blinked, spotting Spoonie's pillow and blanket on the opposite couch.
Why were you sleeping out here?
NC's in the room next to mine. Mars Girl raised an eyebrow.
Yeah? And?
Spoonie blushed, toying with his ponytail. Well, right after you guys left, the Critic challenged the nerd to a fight, and they went to his room and haven't left since. The nostalgia chick groaned.
If they killed each other, I swear to God,
From the sounds of things, they weren't fighting. At least not in the sense you're thinking. Spoonie cringed, grinning uncomfortably.
Come on, don't you get it?
He made a lewd gesture with his hands.
Oh, ew!
Mars Girl yelped, clapping her hands over her face and shaking her head.
Did not need to know that, Spoonie!
The nostalgia chick just stared at him, her face slowly twisting into an expression of disgust.
Well, I'm glad they finally did it, but ugh!
She shivered.
I need to sleep and forget I ever saw you imply what I just saw you imply.
She patted Mars, who was still shaking her head and groaning, on the back and stretched out on the couch, gingerly adjusting her wounded limbs until she reached some semblance of comfort. Spoonie grabbed his pillow and blanket, still smirking, and headed back to his webcam, mind reeling like a drunk.
Night, Mars.
The nostalgia chick yawned, pulling a large towel over herself as a blanket.
Night, nostalgia chick.
Mars Girl settled down on the other couch and turned off the light.
Hey, Mars? Yeah? You've got a plan, haven't you?
The nostalgia chick's tone was half hopeful and half accusatory.
Yeah, I do,
Mars Girl said, staring up at the dark ceiling.
So, how are we going to do it?
The chick pressed.
All those robots, not to mention Insano himself, how are we going to rescue Linkara?
Mars Girl rolled over and didn't reply. Arch Nemesis Linkara, as you requested, Master, the Insano bots chorused, standing before a large door. No sooner had the robot spoken, the door slid open of its own accord and Linkara found himself being shoved inside the Insano bots. It really wasn't comforting when the mindless robotic drones of death were pushing you into a room they didn't dare enter. Just as he was beginning to consider the effectiveness of his "I am a man" punch within Dr. Insano's lair, something crashed into him and slammed him against the wall. After the initial shock had worn off, Linkara saw that it was Dr. Insano himself, multicolored goggles mere inches from Linkara's nose. Before Linkara could say or do anything, Dr. Insano had gone and done something truly insane, even for him. He kissed Linkara. As Linkara was kissed by his archenemy of several years, he began to realize that Dr. Insano was no longer the weak little scientist he remembered. He'd been working out, or using some kind of unholy steroids, and was keeping Linkara against the wall fairly easily. That was just as scary as the fact that the mad doctor was kissing him on the lips. The second Insano broke away, Linkara started babbling. However, Insano had also been groping him rather insistently around that time. So Linkara's babbling wasn't exactly coherent.
Is there something wrong with your air filtration system? Because your harem just tried to jump me and now you're kissing me and, doing that and, well, it's rather, suspicious behavior.
Linkara abandoned the grueling task of talking.
Have you ever looked in the mirror lately, Linkara?
Insano asked, beginning to work at Linkara's belt.
You were cute enough to back then when you were just sitting on that futon reviewing bad comics and everythly foiling my schemes. But now you're the leader of the resistance.
He unzipped Linkara's pants and grinned.
That alone made you go from handsome to sexy in a week. Besides,
he slid his hand into the other man's pants, giggling as Linkara started to moan.
As I'm sure they've informed you, I don't make use of my harem in the way that most people traditionally have. They're just a show. Amusing, but a show nonetheless. You're the one I really want.
Suddenly, Insano withdrew his hand, seized Linkara by the shoulders, and flung him up onto the table in the center of the room. The leader of the resistance attempted some resistance, as Dr. Insano clambered up onto the table as well and began straddling him. But all Linkara managed to do was send the various items scattered over the table, papers, beakers, coffee mugs, Red Bull cans, maps, crashing onto the floor.
Oh yes, fight, struggle.
Dr. Insano laughed, pinning Linkara's hands to the table.
You're only delaying the inevitable. That pitiful gang of yours will never get past my robots of death. I am taking over the world, and now I will have you at my mercy. You've meddled in my affairs for the last time, Linkara. And now you will know the full measure of my wrath.
Then he dove down and kissed his arch nemesis on the lips. Again. Linkara gulped, staring up at the blinding overhead lights. This was officially his weirdest day ever. The next morning, Mars Girl shifted from foot to foot impatiently.
Where's MC and the nerd? Everyone else is accounted for.
As if on cue, the nostalgia critic and the AVGN stumbled down the hallway and into the main room, slightly disheveled and looking incredibly pleased with themselves. The nerd was wearing the critic's t-shirt and the critic was wearing the nerd's button-down.
What have you been doing in his room?
Goggles asked, eyeing the nerd suspiciously. The AVGN looked uncomfortable and scratched his head. Fighting? Oh, yes! The nostalgia critic nodded enthusiastically. Lots of fighting. He began to look severely uncomfortable as well. Goggles gave them both a good long look, then turned back to Mars Girl.
So, what's the plan, fearless leader?
Mars Girl stabbed the map of Dr. Encino's lair with a kitchen knife.
We go in and take out that bastard. All out strike. He'll never see it coming. We've been laying low for so long he thinks we're just a bunch of meddling kids. But he took Linkara.
Mars Girl snarled, making a few members of the team jump back in alarm.
And Sano's going down. Who's with me?
Everyone raised their hands. Mati raised both, looking panicked but brave. Mars Girl smiled, nodding to herself.
Prepare yourselves. We move out in 20 minutes.
Linkara hadn't slept. On the rare occasion that Dr. Encino had taken a break to rest or fetch some food, Linkara had been too busy grappling with his sanity and devising escape plans to do something like sleep. He liked women. Really, he did. He was certain of that, but then again, he'd never really given much thought to going gay, especially with Dr. Encino of all people. So did that make him bisexual now, or just heterosexual with Encino tendencies? Yes, he'd been scared out of his mind during the first couple of rounds, but it had been pretty enjoyable thus far, in spite of his initial misgivings. Again, Dr. Encino. There was the unspoken fact that if he tried to leave, Encino would order his robots to vaporize him or something, and Encino kept laughing at appropriate times, but beyond that... Linkara was beginning to give more thought to this original something-in-the-air filters theory. Arch-nemesis were not supposed to have sex. Both of them certainly weren't supposed to enjoy it if they did.
I've been thinking of killing you and reanimating you right after, so you'll never age. Wouldn't that be nice?
Encino idly remarked after his latest coffee run. Linkara just stared at him. They hadn't moved from the table, and now most of their clothes were scattered along the files with Red Bull cans on the floor.
Of course, you probably lose your consciousness along the way, and as much as I like the idea of you licking my head, I don't want you to go and try to eat my brains. Ah, well,
Encino shrugged.
I'll think of something to keep you under control. This is all very well for now, but I can't have you getting ideas about escaping or trying to overthrow me.
Encino lightly shoved Linkara back down and retrieved his iconic hat from the floor.
Put this back on.
The door slid open, and instead of robots on the threshold, however, it was the Resistance. While everyone stared at each other in shock, Linkara flung himself from the table and began tugging on his pants.
Get him! Get him!
He yelped. The Resistance complied, surging forward and attacking Encino.
Nobody rapes Linkara on our watch!
That's for Linkara, Dr. Lamo!
You stupid sack of science!
Pants secured and t-shirt back on, Linkara parted the melee and stared down at the bruised and beaten Dr. Encino.
I am a man!
Linkara roared, delivering one final punch to the scientist. Dr. Encino crumbled to the ground, unconscious.
Oh my god! Did he do that to you?
Mars Girl yelped, throwing her arms around...
Oh my god, what did he do to you?
Mars Girl yelped, throwing her arms around Linkara.
I thought he was going to turn you into a robot, not...
It's fine, Mars, really. And I am so glad that you guys got here in time.
Linkara began putting on his jacket, avoiding everyone's eyes, and trying to hold off on having a complete mental breakdown.
Guys, what's that?
The nostalgic chick asked nervously. Everyone whirled around. A bright red light on Dr. Insano's console was flashing. Suddenly the words, Outpost number 237, Antarctica, appeared on the screen, and a crackling transmission began. Master, I am the last surviving Insanobot. Your obedience domes have been destroyed. Your fortresses and gladiator rings have been crushed. My power supply has been cut, and I too am failing. See the full scale of this horror. The view screens flooded with video footage, some with sound, some without, mostly shaky handheld reels, but all of the same things. Piles of smoke rubble had once been the symbols of Dr. Insano's mighty empire. Whoa, Goggles said. Badass, Joe whispered fervently. That's a lot of fish, the nostalgia critic intoned. The AVGN elbowed him in the side in response. Marty voiced what everyone was thinking. But if we didn't do all of that, then who did? Before anyone had a chance to gulp, the door was blasted open. The nostalgia critic's jaw dropped. Suede? The one and only. The brown-jacketed New Zealander gazed around, gigantic gun still smoking profusely. I see that you don't find anyone to replace me. Shame, that. Why? How? The nostalgia critic babbled. The AVGN patted him on the shoulder. What I believe my esteemed colleague is trying to say is, why the fuck have you shown up now? Suede pointed at the calendar. My missionary duties ended 3 days ago. Then I broke out the really big guns, he grinned, craning his neck. Benzai, is that you back there? Mon Dieu! Benzai yelped, launching himself across the room and towards the Mormon warrior. Suede barely had enough time to drop his gun before the Frenchman had come full force and knocked him to the floor, where he proceeded to kiss him passionately. He began kissing every inch of the New Zealander he could reach, and after each kiss he whispered, I love you, I love you, I love you. A wave of hysterical giggles distracted everyone but the couple on the floor from, well, the couple on the floor. Dr. Insano was laughing, goggles askew, cuts bleeding viciously.
You think you won, do you? Well, you'll never get the satisfaction of taking me alive!
And before anyone could move, Insano staggered to his feet and dove out the window. Everyone, even Benzai and Suede, ran to the windows, but it was too late to do anything but watch as the man in the white lab coat plummeted down into the unending crevice that had been excavated when the Insano fortress was constructed.
Well,
Linkara coughed, pulling away from the window.
That was, unsettling. At least we don't have to debate about killing him or not now, huh?
The AVGN said.
I'm glad the fucker's dead.
You sure about that? Spoonie asked, eyeing the pit nervously. He could still be alive.
No one could survive a fall like that, even if he was a robot.
Joe glanced at Linkara. Was he a robot?
No, Joe,
Linkara said, leaning against the wall, tilting his head back, eyes shut.
I'm pretty sure he wasn't a robot.
They all stared at the view screens for a while, watching the handheld cameras pan shakily across piles of rubble that used to be the obedience domes, stretches of gravel that used to be gladiator pits, and smoking craters where Insano's fortresses had been. I take it back, the nostalgia critic said, watching as some civilians began piling up pieces of robots and sticking flags atop them. Take back what? The AVGN asked. Suede is what the Cloverfield monster should have been. Yeah, you're right, the AVGN replied, nodding to himself. Linkara was looking at the screens, but in reality he was busy sorting through his mind. He'd been shoved into this room last night expecting to die, and had instead been jumped by his arch-nemesis, and the jumping part hadn't been all that bad. Insano probably wouldn't have killed him, though, and now Linkara had been rescued. Insano was probably dead, and the world was saved. He needed a shower, a drink, and about 3 days of sleep, but there simply wasn't time.
Mars Girl,
Linkara offered his arm gallantly.
Shall we go rebuild the Earth?
Mars Girl took his arm and grinned.
Most definitely.
The nostalgia critic punched the AVGN, who retaliated by grabbing him, dipping him, and planting a romantic kiss on his lips, and then dropping the critic to the floor and laughing. Benzai leaned against Suede. The New Zealander put his arms around the Frenchman and whispered, I miss you too. Kyle turned to Goggles. Yeah, can I get you a coffee?
Sure,
Goggles smiled.
I'd like that.
The guitar guy and that chick with the goggles headed out in search of a coffee shop, untouched by Dr. Insano's reign of insanity, flirting with the idea of holding hands. The nostalgia chick glared off Angry Joe and Spoonie before they could make any offers, then turned around and had only an instant to widen her eyes before Mars Girl kissed her. As the kiss deepened, the nostalgia chick felt her face beginning to redden. Everyone was watching them. Well, everyone but Benzai and Suede, who were currently locked in such a passionate embrace that you need a diagram to figure out whose legs were whose.
Let's go somewhere private, okay?
The nostalgia chick suggested, blushing as Mars Girl took her hand.
Sounds like a plan to me.
They strode out, hand in hand, Mars Girl pausing to wrap her arm around the chick's waist before they disappeared around the corner. Dude, that's so hot! Spoonie groaned to no one in particular. Yeah! Angry Joe glanced at Spoonie. You want to go get drunk and watch porn? Yes! Spoonie nodded furiously, striding out of the room. Hurry! He added in an undertone as Joe jogged to catch up with them. They might have stopped at the parking lot to make out some more! The critic held out his hand to the nerd. All's fair in love and war? Nodding, the nerd took the critic's hand. My place? Hells yes! The two men raced each other down the stairs, shouting insults up at each other as they ran, nearly knocking over Spoonie and Angry Joe on their way out. Mati sighed. I'm so alone, he said to himself, leading down the hallway to the exit.
Hey,
Purred Raven from the doorway to the harem. Mati gulped.
I...
He squeaked. Raven eyed him lasciviously and smirked, calling over her shoulder.
Girls, there's a man out here. A real man.
She turned back to Mati.
One who's really interested in utilizing our talents.
Mati gulped again and tried to discreetly cover the front of his pants. Raven tisk-tisked and beckoned him inside.
Come on, real man. We haven't gotten fucked in ages.
She turned and walked into the room seductively. Mati followed her inside. Alright, he muttered triumphantly to himself. Raven shut the door. The end? Deep underground in an ancient subway tunnel, a man strikes a match. The light flares briefly, flickering against his multicolored goggles.
You may think you have defeated me, Linkara, but don't get too comfortable. Once we have rebuilt the Earth, I shall materialize at your side and destroy it again! For science!
The man laughed, hysterically, coughing slightly.
Oh, but this broken body of mine is quite useless now. Hardly worthy of humiliating you. Time to activate the backup!
Spoonie? The blogger closed his laptop and tossed a shirt over his webcam. Coming, guys! He called over his shoulder. Just a minute!
Well, hurry up! The porn won't watch itself!
He laughed. Yeah. Glancing up at the concealed webcam, the blogger grinned.
Soon the world will tremble anew at the return of Dr. Insano!
Chuckling evilly to himself, he stood up and stretched. Dr. Insano was not gone. Far from it, in fact. Running his hands over his new body, physically similar to his old one, but still very different, Dr. Insano nodded to himself, gazing around at his new lair. He'd conquered the Earth before. He could do it again. And this time, he wouldn't be nearly so gentle with Linkara. P.S. This has fantastic potential for crazy fan art. Hint, hint. The end. All I really have to say about this story is, how dare she snub me out? What, am I not attractive enough to at least be paired up with one of Dr. Insano's sloppy seconds? If sexy were a flavor, I'd be diet sexy. By the way, look for that on a t-shirt coming soon. Well, our time is up. But join us next time, will you?
Why haven't we had My Immortal, the greatest fanfic ever written, on here yet? Please, oh please, can we see it?
Really? Because I got a Mario Brother fanfic where they beat up Leonardo DiCaprio, and it's pretty...
Please do My Immortal, it would be so amazing!
But My Immortal is so famous and read so many times that what can I possibly add to it that hasn't been...
Have you ever considered trying to read My Immortal? The infamous Harry Potter fic?
Seriously, that Mario beating up Leonardo fic is pretty...
I'm still waiting for you to read
My Immortal.
chapter of My Immortal.
All right! Fine! I'll do it! Every single chapter of that godforsaken piece of shit! But don't come crying to me when your sanity has been shattered. I've been at the Sage, and may
God have mercy on all of us.